Paradox Interactive has been delighted us with excellent global strategies for the past 3 decades. Large-scale battles of World War II, the introduction of medieval intrigue, exploration of the New World, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, and even the construction of fantastic states in distant galaxies. All this in the project of Swedish developers. Victoria series is the first list stands alone. Of all of these, considered the most elaborated and the most difficult to master. Since the release of the second part, more than 10 years have passed. All this time, the game remained one of the favorite among the fans of the studio, so the appearance of the sequel was only a matter of time. Shortly before the release of Victoria 3, we were given access to the press version, in which I spent more than 24 hours. It was not enough to master all the subtitles, but enough to form an opinion about the game. Before us, in another global strategy game, the event of which take place from 1836 to 1936, right between Europa Universal and Heart of Iron. Like in general counterparts, the games focused on simulating several pillars of government, if in whole in the sphere and in the EU expansion. Here the emphasis in the economics and politics. The economics part strikes you from the get-go with its scope, dozens of types of goods, duties and taxes, dynamically changing market, foreign and domestic trade, production development, combating and trade war. And all of this, the author assures you works in conjunction with each other, but an economy is nothing without its main driving force: people. The people must be managed skillfully, for it is they who toil, trade and fight for the greatness of the country. The task of the player in Victoria 3, one of the way to the perspective of this empire, in his maneuver between the needs of the people and the economic expectancy. But other countries do not allow competitors to further up the fat, capture profitable markets, colonize land with promising resources, or the old-fashioned fun of war to expand their living space. I advise everyone who is going to get acquainted with this series to stock up on a free time. You will have to spend a lot of just to learn the basic. I will try to explain how everything works here, but only in general terms, because these reviews will not enough for a complete analysis. In Victoria 3, the player does not act as a ruler, but as an instinctive spirit of the country, a familiar trick to the Swedish developers, from which they have departed only in Crusader Kings. At the start you can choose any country, except the very undeveloped, but the starting date is the same. The main mode is a sandbox, which is also standard for a Paradox interactive strategies, but there are also several options with clearly defined goals: conquer most of the world, ensure the highest standards of living of the population, or control most of the world's GDP. There is an tutorial mode, in which newcomers to the channel is better to spend a dozen hours. The benefit of it, you can play for different countries. Understand on the fly does not work, so be prepared to read as the pop-up tips and the built-in encyclopedia. A good idea would be to read the diaries of the developers, where they describe the mechanics in detail. Occupation, by the way, is also time-consuming. Diaries came out more than 50. Each adds a volume comparable to this article, but it will be many times easier to understand how everything works here. There are two main ways of interacting with the world: economics action, building production buildings and managing the market, and political actions, domestic and foreign policy in all its manifestations. Everything seems simple with production. We build farms, mines and factories, barracks, naval bases, educational and government institutions. But we shouldn't forget the specifics. Production will not be benefit just because it has appeared on the map. Each factory needs a supply of resource and manpower. In addition, in the case of workers, policies closely related to population come into play. Victoria 3 used a division of a country population into groups, each reflecting the characteristic of the population. Our citizens are not number of showing the number of labor force of the composition of the army, but people with their own characteristics, need, desires and motivation. Many parameters are taken into account: wealth, equality, gender, age, education, culture and religion, political learning and loyalty to the exciting government. Such a deep simulation is made for a reason. It is the foundation on which the gameplay is built. For example, in order to work in a factory, employees must have the right profession and receive a decent wage, otherwise they will leave to seek a better life in another enterprise, or even leave the region or immigrate from the country. In order to make a profit, you have to consider the expediency of construction. Why do you need a power plant if you have a consumer of electricity? Such production will not be able to sell a service profitability, will not hire a class employers, and will not bring a penny in taxes. Wouldn't it be better to invest in an obsolete but constantly in demand coal-fired power plant, which requires no trained personnel? And this is just the tip of the iceberg. The connection between industry and the population is very deep. Don't forget that every resident has a needs, and not just a physical needs. Everyone needs to eat and clothes, but the greater the wealth, the greater the demands, you have to think about how to make the increased demands, because unlike the poor, busy just looking for a piece of bread, the educated and wealthy people have political interests as well. They join movements, vote in election and demand laws. The population has to reckon with. Even if your country is a monarchy with unlimited power of the ruler, yes, you can suppress the political conscience of citizens by banning their studies and limiting contacts with people from other countries, but then you will not see any technological development, and other players on the world stage are not sleeping. Cheap labor, valuable resource and convenient for trade geographical features of your country may become an object of not peaceful interest from the neighbors. Which army will win? An army armed with latest technology and modern tactics, or a horde of untrained military with ancient weapons? So it is necessary to look after your population and sometimes kick them into a brighter future. Large-scale reforms here can be very painful and accomplished by riots and revolutions. On the other hand, nothing prevents you from inventing a challenge for yourself. For example, to control all country with a slave system and an economy built on the use of manual labor. For domination in Victoria Free can also be achieved peacefully. War here looks the least elaborated compared to other paradox projects. Even the units on the map cannot try only the higher requirements in the garrisons and consider centers and send them to the fronts. Years of combat automatically create of the border with an enemy. In the case, a deep battle simulation traditional for strategy studios may not go anywhere, take into account both the future of the terrain and the parameters of commanders, weapons and moral qualities of troops. Therefore, is more important than even to think about the outcome of the battle long before the first shot is fired. More at the point, everything encouraged opponents to resolve their difference at a negotiation table. The mechanics of diplomatic games are used for this purpose. When the interests of two states clash, one of them can put forward in demand to the other. The defense is free to either concentrate or resist, putting forward these arguments, the main of which will be military force, ready to engage in combat if the conflict breaks out. This is where allies or countries with a strategic interest in the region or confrontation came in handy. You can try killing them on the side, counting on the fact that the opponent will get scared and withdraw his claims. However, he may find his friends and make new demands if he is confident of victory. The result is an intrigue tangle of confirmation, and the smaller border despite somewhere in the backwards of the Third World Code ignited World War. If in single-player games diplomacy is not so fascinating, then in multiplayer there's a lot of room to intrigue. Unexpected alliances and betrayal, nothing prevents, for example, to promise help and then withdraw support at the last moment to weaken the component or the hand of the other. It is possible to expand our influence on the world stage by purely peaceful means. For example, through interactional trade. trade not by annexing other countries, but by capturing their markets. Why go to war with China over red tea plantation, losing people and undermining the economy, if we can force it to trade tea at price we can afford? In Victoria, free war is hardly in last place. It is much more interesting to interact with the game world by other means, which however can be just as formidable and destructive. You might think that this is a perfect game for those who like look at graphs, comparing market and production efficiency, as well as for who want to get their hands on the game before entering a real political career. Let me say at once, there's still a long way to go perfection. I won't dwell on the technical problems. After all, I had the press version in my hands, which by definition has no release patches. Of course, bugs were encountered, but hopefully they will be fixed, if not already. Significantly more annoying is the behavior of the AI, the unobvious action of other nations, and their generally passive foreign policy makes the rarely too boring. You are unlikely to be touched by anyone if you do not look for adventure. However, in the first few games there is no time for that. It's better to deal with inferior affairs, and there's bound to get complicated even when you start to understand how things work here. The reason is simple: the interface leaves a lot to be desired, and this will be the main compliment to the developers. I admit that they were able to create a working simulation of the political and economic system, but it is convenient to manage and monitor it with the tools that game offers. For example, there are no detailed statistics with a time perspective. There's a graphs, but they are not scalable and only show a general trend, and sometimes you need exact values. Managing industry development is a separate headache, especially if you try to quickly build something based on market data. By the time you get to the right menu, you forget exactly what you want to do. Monstrous and completely useful come out the population menu. Yes, it once again emphasizes that every residence is simulated, but the current form does not help to apply this knowledge in this gameplay. Yes, in the general, the interface lacks consistency. In the couple of places you can turn out in tight view, but in general there is a feeling that developers went too far with artistic design. It looks a very nice strategy, but I would trade all the beauty by the convenience. Don't think that I'm being picky. In a project like this, you interact with the controllers much more often than you admire the picture. Multiple such misfires by the size of the game and the microcontrol proportion to the size of the state, and you get an experience that does not affect the impression of the game in the best way.